Hello and welcome to the Liberated by Faith podcast. I'm your host, Carly Modra, and I am so grateful to have you here. The Liberated by Faith podcast is a space where I'll be sharing stories of freedom, grace, and redemption. A space where I and my guests will be sharing the ways that God is working in and through our lives and how we came to know Him. Many of us believing it was the absolute last place we would have ever found ourselves, yet here we are. When you are a seeker of truth and not willing to stop until you find it, it always leads you to one place, to the Creator of all creation, to the one true God who begets all of it. I am so happy to have you here, and I look forward to sharing this ever-growing testimony to God's love, faithfulness, and goodness. Thank you for being here and sharing in this journey with me. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Liberated by Faith podcast. I'm very excited to have my very first man on the show. That's you, Alex. So Alex and I very recently connected through a mutual friend like a week ago. So his story is completely new to me, and from what I understand, was not in the New Age. So most of the testimonies so far have been New Age to Jesus, but I'm very excited to hear his story because I think he shared about 3 dot points of where he had come from. And I was like, yes, let's do this. So thank you so much for being here, Alex. And yeah, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and then we could go from there.
Thanks, Carly. Yeah, I know very little about your show as well, which is fun. So it's really nice to be here. It's my first it's my first faith-based podcast I've been on. I've been on a lot. I used to host a podcast on coaching and marketing because that's my business. To the Moon Digital, that's my marketing business, and that's how I met our mutual friend Elise. And here we are. And yeah, it's really exciting to be on here and just talk about a different journey. Certainly, the last thing I would have expected, even 6 months ago, to be on this show. But here we are.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? I think that's definitely a key to all of the stories that has been the same is it was the pivot of our lifetime that we absolutely never expected. So yeah, do you want to start like what was your childhood like? Was there Christianity in your childhood or yeah, go from there.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in England, and so my Christianity was kind of like English Christian. Like we sometimes went to church. I think I went to Sunday school when I was a little kid. Sometimes um, English style village, parish, that sort of thing, vicar, and uh, and then in England, I'm not sure what primary school's like in Australia, but in England, you sing your hymns in assembly, and we would do like bow your head for the Lord's Prayer before lunch, but it was by no means like a Christian ideology, and so yeah, my dad's family, they're in that, yeah, English Christian. Like I know my nan would go to church every week, and my dad would at like Easter, and then that was about it. And so no, we had very little influence of that at all growing up until I moved here at age 12 as we moved to Australia in 2003. And so nothing really, no real influence there at all, to be honest. So I can't blame my parents for this road I'm on.
Uh,
Maybe my nan. But when we moved to Australia, I was 12 as I said, and so you don't really care about anything before you're 12. So I've got no real massive connection to England. But my sister was 16 when we moved here, and that's a tricky time to move countries, because she's got, I suppose, real friendships, real connections, doing exams and stuff in England, maybe plans. And then we moved here, and the friendship group she kind of became friends with at school just happened to be, I guess, going to youth group, that sort of thing. So to hang out with them, she started going to youth groups, and then eventually going to a local church. And then basically my sister has been hugely hugely Christian for the last sort of 19 years since then, maybe 19, 20 years. And she ended up quitting her job as a physiotherapist, to then pursue ministry. So she went to Sydney Uni and did what was it called? A master's in divinity, which I didn't even know was a thing. And
Yeah.
then she became a chaplain in maximum security prisons here in Sydney. And
Wow.
now she's over in the Basque country of Spain on a mission, kind of spreading the word over in Spain. So massive influence from my sister. But as we know about our families, that does nothing to help. If anything, that does the complete opposite of sharing the good news. It just tell if your parents or your family tells, especially your older siblings, tell you to do something, and you're a bit of a contrarian like myself, that is the worst thing they can do to get you to make any sort of decision. Whether that's reading a book, watch your Netflix show, or anything, it's going to be a hard no. And so that's my family basis in Christianity has basically been my sister being extraordinarily Christian and hoping and praying and trying to help me uh, come across the line for 2 decades, and me wanting absolutely nothing to do with it. And it probably driving me further away than anything. That's kind of what brought me up until about 6 months ago. That was my journey with Christianity.
Wow. That's a massive, yeah, commitment from your sister too, to give up physiotherapy and go into missionary work. That's amazing. And yeah, totally relate. I think that when I was in the new age, so I know you haven't had that background, but it was very like I would always be wanting
Can you
to push.
explain the New Age? 'Cause sorry, I'm sorry, because at the beginning, I don't want to interrupt. You
Yeah,
mentioned like
yeah.
everyone's come from New Age. What are you referring to there?
Oh, so it's a big movement, I guess, but tarot cards and all of that sort of stuff,
Got it.
Reiki, energy
Yeah.
healing. There's a whole gamut of things, and mostly, yeah, well, everyone's that I've had on the show so far, because that was my background.
Hmm.
We came from these new age practices, and found Jesus. So. But when I was in the new age, I really wanted to push it all. Like all my family needed to be doing everything that I was doing as far as I was concerned. Yet, um, I feel like even though it still probably pushed you away, there's more of a gentleness with Christ. Like there's not that forceful pushing. People still, it's like you hear the word Jesus and it repulses people, is what I have found, the same that it did for me. And it really is just about planting seeds, I think. So yeah, so that was your journey, Christianity. And I know so tell us a bit about what was happening parallel to this. Tell us about your life that was going on while you
Yeah.
was in here.
I suppose I've always been a bit of a rat bag, Carly, to be honest, right? So my big challenge my whole life has really been that I'm I'm pretty intelligent and want nothing to do with formal education whatsoever, right? And so from the age of, I think my first challenging sort of school reports came in like year 2 from Mrs. Buckley, who I loved to bits, and then Jenny Lewin in year 4, and then Miss Venables in year 6 and upwards. Always just like, Alex is so clever and doesn't use his potential. He won't stop messing around, won't stop talking, never does his homework. He could do so much better, right? And there you go. And this is such a difficult thing, retrospectively, that chipping away at you as a
Mm.
kid, like Alex could be doing so much better. Alex doesn't live up to his potential. He should be doing this, whatever. Same sort of thing. It just pushed me further and further away from this system. And I'm doing my very best to use fewer four-letter words these days, but it was always like that kind of mentality was like, leave me alone. Let me
Yeah.
do what I want to do. Because yeah, I can write. I'm smart, but I'm not. I don't want to sit here and learn about what you're telling me. Um, I loved like ancient history, and that's a big part of my testimony later on. But I I had no desire to be part of this elite private school system I was in, right? And so, like saying how if my sister would recommend a movie to me, he'd be like, "That's going on my list of movies I will never watch." In my high school, which is a very famous elite high school here in Sydney called Knox Grammar, always in the news for some sort of scandal, right? Um, Probably a really, really great school. And in hindsight, probably I didn't, or definitely didn't get enough out of it, right? But my little group of friends, we were all into like skateboarding and we were all into music and we had our little rock band that we started. And we were a pretty good band, we were on the local radio and won some competitions, that sort of thing. And we just every time we were trying to put in line, it just pushed us further away from that. To the point where like I remember specifically this moment in like year 12, right? When my school, and I'm not sure what school, you're in Queensland, yeah?
Yeah, but grew up in South Australia,
Yeah,
so
right.
different school
So
set.
I don't know if it's just a Sydney theme, but you have like these groups of private schools and you kind of all compete against each other. And it's like the big night of the year. And it was like the swimming carnival was this massive thing. And everyone went to the swimming carnival and was like, oh, blue, black, oh. And on the weekend or like in the evening when you didn't have to be there, I was like, why would you go? Like to support your school. And I remember the head boy who was at this point one of my peers, one of my classmates, standing at the front of our school in assembly in front of like 2,000 people and going, "We're going to be welcoming up the swimmers next. I want to ask that if you're not going to support your school tonight, I'd ask you to get up and leave the room." Right? And no one moved. And then I was like, you know what? It's got to be me. I knew I wasn't going. I knew heaps of people weren't going. So I stood up and started leaving. A bunch of people followed me, and we just got booed by like 2,000 people. What a ridiculous mindset, right, in that school. And they all thought they were doing the right thing. So fair play to them. But for someone who's already a little bit anti-establishment, that's not going to help. Right. So when it came to doing things like HSC, uni, like I was just coasting through, getting good marks with no effort, to the constant frustration of my parents and my teachers and my sister who tried really hard at school and did way better than me. But I was getting like awards and stuff, and then going skateboarding all night in my leopard print jeans. And I was a real punk rock kid. And I just did whatever I could, basically, Carly, to annoy people, just to kind of stand out and annoy the private school people. And this was just my life. And so as I left school, this continued into me being in this rock band. Okay, how can we make our band as controversial as possible? Right? Our band was called Lester Bangs, right? It was the name of a rock journalist from the 70s. So our t-shirt said Lester Bangs your mum, right? And we'd wear them out in public. And then we'd have flyers for our concerts. And, forgive me, everyone listening to this podcast. I'm sure you're lovely conservative people, but we used to have flyers for our concerts, and it would be like a dude in a trench coat with a mustache saying like free candy at the Lesser Bangs gig, kids. Or we literally had one which was, hand drawn by me, a picture of our Lord and Savior Jesus on a cross inviting people to a gig because it would be like, come hang with us, tonight, that sort of thing. And we were just whenever we went on the radio, we were just making dumb jokes and trying to annoy people. And that lifestyle, led to us not going to. I got into uni, with like a scholarship to Sydney Uni, and then rocked up once a week, smoke some cigarettes, go to the bar, go home again, and not interested. And this was, for a few years there, I was just basically a bit of a rat bag. Like you mentioned, like drugs. I was never like a hard drugs guy, but we're just always smoking weed, always just rolling cigarettes, hanging out at the train station, drinking goon, real like crusty punk kids. And as I got older, it didn't progress and get worse. I definitely grew out of that stuff because I started working as a chef in kitchens. But for sure, I'd like that level of anti-establishment, don't tell me what to do, just grew with me. And to this day, like, you know, certain world events that happened in 2020, that sort of thing. I was just, not to get your podcast banned, Carly, but
I was there
I,
with you, don't worry.
yeah,
Yes.
but if anyone's like going to be, you know, annoyed about something, it was going to be me, Mr. Cynical, Mr. Contrarian, and it just got that kind of like punky F you attitude just came the whole way through my life. And I only really softened once I had my kids, once I had my daughters in 2020 as well, when my priorities just became, be a good dad. But up until then, I was probably looking back pretty selfish just because I'd rather my opinion be right or my opinion get a reaction than actually try and form a genuine, connection with someone. So that's kind of like what I was like for a pretty long time, Carly, to
Wow.
tell the story.
Yeah, so much of that yeah, wasn't so much the punk for me, but just have always been anti-establishment as well. That's why I homeschool my kids. So,
Mm.
but yes, I think there's a place for that. But I've also been like you, where we can tip into the extreme. I think we can still hold those views, but yeah, I've definitely softened with that as well. But so, all right. So, yeah, little bit of Christianity in your upbringing, not a huge amount, but then, yeah, this sister who is doing amazing things in that world. You anti-establishment. What got you from that point to? So, was it last year? Did you say around October last year?
Yeah, like 6 months ago.
6 months. So
Yeah.
it's still so fresh in you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Take us on that journey. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So I think that what there's a real and it depends on obviously what content you listen to, but there seems to be like a real revival happening in the world at the moment, in the world of male influencers, young men, right? And a lot of big names in that sort of anti-establishment movement, be it Jordan Peterson or Russell Brand, to a lesser extent, Joe Rogan, Conor McGregor, lots of these, masculine names who are always getting in trouble for things they've said about the government or whatever, all suddenly turning to Christianity. And it never really, that didn't, I don't think that really ever made me think, oh, good idea. But for the first time, I wasn't like, oh, switching off this. That's BS. It's like, okay, I'll listen. It's just how this person is. And that's kind of how my attitude was with my sister Claire for the last few years as well. Maybe the last year wasn't so much, oh, I want to debate you about this. It was like, oh, how was church? That's awesome.
Yeah.
More supportive, but not for me. It wasn't so much like let's disrupt and mock this. It was just like, okay, let's accept this, which is hopefully, whether or not that was part of my journey or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was watching a lot of these daily podcasts just for my, content and news, whatever. And then I think like, yeah, probably maybe September, August, a comedian I was listening to. I love stand-up comedy, just a Brooklyn comedian from America, Chris DiStefano, not that famous, but he's in that kind of Joe Rogan universe. He was on the show and he's a pretty crude guy. And he was just talking about a book called The Case for Christ, which is a very famous book by Lee Strobel. Funnily enough, a book that my sister had placed on my bedside table when I was like 16 and had left it there, hopefully, and promptly got it put back on her bed. Um, and I love ancient history, as I said before, like Romans and, you know, Greeks and like I did very well in Latin at school, private school nerd. And I kind of had finished my World War II phase and I was like, oh, new history book. That'll be good. So I started listening to this book, The Case for Christ. And for anyone who hasn't read that book, it's basically a journalist who went out and, to my understanding, wanted to almost debunk Christianity by asking experts about the history of it and kind of ended up converting himself by accident, right? And so I was listening to this book and got really into it and just loved the content and found myself being like, huh, I'm not resisting this as much as I thought I would. That's interesting. And at a similar time, my wife Ali and I were looking for a new show. And my sister about a year ago had shown us an episode of a show called The Chosen, which is once again a kind of a biopic series about the Gospels, the life of Jesus. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty good show. Doesn't mean we're getting into Christianity. It's just a history show. So we watched that. So I've got it coming from all angles. When I'm at the gym and walking in the morning, I'm listening to Lee Strobel interviewing experts about how like the resurrection historically makes sense, which is a bonkers thing to say. And then I'm watching The Chosen at night and I'm thinking, oh, this Jesus sounds like a pretty good dude. And then I found myself, hopping on Amazon and being like, I'm gonna learn more about this. It's interesting that I'm not resisting this. So I bought myself a King James Bible off Amazon. It's the
Wow.
only one I'd heard of. I'd never
Yeah.
heard of a different kind of Bible. So I got that to my house and I opened it and I was like, I'm going to try and read this. And I was like, what does this mean? I don't understand. Is this what my sister's reading every day? This is nonsense. Thee, thy, and all this kind of. So I went to my Christian friend, who's been one of my best mates since high school, and I was like, dude, I've been trying to read the Bible. I don't understand. Is it always this difficult? He's like, you bought the wrong one, bro. Like, get a new international. It's in easier language to understand. So I got that, and I just started like being like, okay, I'm going to lean into this. This seems like a good thing, and I think I'm not sure where I'd heard it, but I'd heard a phrase, whether it was from the initial comedian or a podcast, that Jesus kind of starts knocking on your door. And at a certain point, you just let him in. And I was like, I think he's knocking on my door and I'm just going to let him in. And so I kind of started reading the Bible, getting into it. Then our friends up the road invited us to church, and it was around Christmas time. They were like, come to church with us for Christmas. And I was like, can't make it Christmas Day. I'm already cooking, but we'll come the week before, And over those few months, like I just started really enjoying it. And my sister, Claire, who's been praying for me for 19 years, almost daily, I'm sure. Crazy thing was, I sent her a text, right? Because I kind of was excited to tell her that I was watching The Chosen. And I sent her a text saying, guess what I'm watching right now? And then I sent her a screenshot of Jesus from The Chosen. And she was like, for almost 20 years, I've been praying for you almost every day. Yesterday, I said to God, I'm leaving it up to you now. And then the next day, I sent her a photo that I was watching The Chosen. Right. So I love that to bits. And she left for her mission in Spain on the 14th of January this year. Right. And so over Christmas and everything, she had given up her apartment. So she was kind of like bed hopping at my parents' house. My wife was still working. I was on like a bit of a Christmas break from my business. So I just hung out with my sister a whole bunch and we were just connecting so deeply over this Christianity thing, becoming so close. And yeah, she stayed at our house on New Year's Eve. And last thing she did New Year's Eve was pray for myself and my wife. And then New Year's Day, we went for a swim in the ocean and I asked her to baptize me. First thing New Year's Day. And here we are, basically. And now I'm the drummer at church. You know, so yeah, man, it's just been like started off with curiosity into history, and then I just kind of was so I just remember using the word interesting so much because it was so interesting to me how resistant I had been to this whole thing for 25 years. And then suddenly I was like, why am I not kind of like trying to pick holes in this? Why am I just accepting this? And then, dude, now it's like probably the happiest I've ever been.
Yes. Oh, I hear that. And I think I thought my 18 months of skepticism and going, no, no, this isn't for me was a long journey. But yeah, 20 years, that takes the cake. But I think that I was just thinking how much your sister would have rejoiced getting that message. I can't even imagine. Like
Yeah,
she
she's
probably
so
cried for days. I would
so
have.
happy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's real. Like we've been good mates, for the last couple since we had our kids, and she was living at our house when we had our daughters, and we all got so close during that time. But then this has just taken it to that another level. We got our shared thing, and yeah, it's just taken down my level of cynicism and like sarcasm, and I'm just I'm just definitely a better brother to her now than I've probably ever been, and that's not coming from me.
This is the thing that I say to people all the time, is that he makes you into a better person. There is no denying that. He changes your heart. And what I tried to do for over a decade in the new age and healing and doing all of these things didn't even scratch the surface for what he did in a year and a half. And he completely changes the way that you see life. Like you just said, you feel like you're happy. Um, for me, it was like truly, for me, it wasn't so much happiness, it was peace. I felt this peace that I had been searching for my whole life and had never found anywhere until I found Christ. And it still blows my mind. I'm like, how is this my life? It's so wild. But, like those things where, your sister's like, right, God, I'm handing this over to you. I'm done. Like 20 years, come on. And literally the next day, like those are things you can't make that up. It's so wild. It's the best. And you just think, I just want everyone to experience this. That's all I keep saying. I'm like, oh, you just want that. And, it's what your sister found 20 years ago and just like, oh my gosh, I just want this for my brother so badly, and it's all in God's timing though.
Yeah, it 100% is, and I think that the wanting to share side of it is something that it's completely flipped my understanding of what that is, because up until this year, wanting to share Christianity for me felt like you'll accept my religion or I won't accept you, sort of thing. Almost like a pushy, hateful message, right?
Yes.
A little, I mean, there's other religions in the world that are pretty violent about spreading and saying we want you have to do this from a place of because if you don't, it's disrespectful to us. But Christian evangelism and just sharing and wanting other people to join, I've now realized it's literally just about love and wanting the best for that person. It's nothing to do with you or us. It's to do with them. And that was a crazy thing I realized. I was like, oh, it's not because like you know, I'm being offensive or anything like that. It's because this will make me better, you know? And so that was a really funny thing to understand. It can flip my whole understanding of why Christians are the way they are, and why they would stand at the side of the road or stand on milk crates in the park and preach that sort of thing, which we
Yeah.
both thought they were psychos, right?
And
Like
weird. Like
both
we're
think,
always like, Christians are so weird, and I joke about this with my Christian friends now. Like, I'm like, sorry, but there is so much judgment. And what's so fascinating, and I've spoken about this a few times with people on the podcast, is that like I was so open to any other religion, like Hinduism and Buddhism and all of those things. I'm like, yeah, I could totally have seen myself walking down that path. But anyone mentioned the word Jesus or Christianity, and it was like, ooh,
mm,
like it was an actual repulsion that it would happen. And we now know that that is because that word holds so much power and it is powerful. And one thing that I have learned is, like you, it's not in our timing. And there is, people in my world that I pray for every day to also know this. And it's just trusting that God has got a plan for them just as much as, it's also part of the plan for me is just trusting in that and having faith that
yeah,
he will come through with his promises when the time is right for them and for us. So,
yeah. The trust is the hard bit, isn't it? Like we had, so I'm now, my family and I are going to church every Sunday and loving it. Like on Friday, you need Sunday, that sort of thing.
yeah.
And then, my kids love it. They're 4. So they go to that little kids' church upstairs and come down with some coloring of
Yeah.
Moses, whatever. And and But I remember I was this week the at the end of our worship. I was sitting behind the drum kit because they managed to hook me, and they're like, oh, they love getting people, they love getting volunteers.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll do anything for attention. And so at the end of that, what the reason I was filling in on drums this week, last minute, was because the brother-in-law of our other drummer had passed away, and the the pastor's wife who sings for us, she was saying at the very end, like, um, in these times, it's like we understand it's difficult to trust that because that you're doing the right thing. You know, when we're so sad or like distressed about things. And I was like, yeah, that is hard, but I'm not really in that situation. Then that afternoon, we were out at the footy with my family, and my 4-year-old daughter, one of them is very sensitive, got very overwhelmed by it and had like this full-blown violent meltdown, right? Real scary one near a main road. It was rough. And in that moment, I was doing my darndest to be like, okay, what's happening here? We are now being taught to be better parents. We're finding out things that we wouldn't have found out about our daughter otherwise. We are like learning what she can deal with, what she can't deal with. This will help her to go to school because we'll be better at it. And real hard mindset to shift into. But when you do, it's actually very peaceful.
Yeah.
When you can almost sort of force yourself to trust in those moments. And it makes me really, really happy actually the way that people were speaking about this gentleman who passed away is just like how gorgeous that these people are actually sitting there sad, but with like peace about this whole thing rather than sort of anger, which would be such a natural and easy and almost like attractive reaction to things, right? Like it's really nice to feel angry sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's not really helping anyone. And so, yeah, that was that trust word has come up a lot in our family this past few days. And I just sent my wife, a Instagram, very, very like poignant Instagram post came up today about the exact thing. Like, if you're having a hard day parenting, like coming from the perspective of Jesus talking, like, I'm doing this because it's going to help you, and I'm there with you, and I'm making you a better parent in these moments. And so, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that that word trust as you mentioned it because it's been a big theme in our house this week.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think it's something just ongoing. I think that will forever go to deeper and deeper levels with, because it's ultimately what he wants, isn't it? Is to have faith. With faith comes trust. That, yeah, it's, and I felt like I had that until I realized I really didn't. It was a transactional version of trust. Like, I'll trust, but so long as this outcome happens. Whereas with God, it's like, can you trust even when the outcome that you want doesn't happen, or in the timeline that you want it to
Yeah.
happen? Or can you keep trusting? Because that's when it gets hard. When it's like, okay, like, can you imagine your sister, 20 years, she just was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
finally surrendered. But I think it's in that letting go. I've had this conversation with a friend of mine. We both came to Christ at a similar time. And yeah, it's something that is been, comes up a lot for both of us, is that letting go. And once you do, it's like you said with your daughter, once you have gone through that process, it's in that letting go that you feel peace, because I think we think we can control things and then we realize that we can't. And so,
Yeah, I think this is what's such a big challenge for a lot of people is that like um and especially these powerful masculine figures. I know you said I'm the first guy to be on the podcast, right? And so maybe just from like a masculine perspective, it is very much like we want to be in control of everything. And that kind of concept of like Jesus take the wheel is pretty unattractive to us. So it's like, nah, self-made man, I'll sort this out, get my hands dirty, roll my sleeves up. You know, if he's there, great, but ultimately this is down to me because that's what we're taught, in
Exactly.
business, hardcore accountability. This is your responsibility. And to an extent, it definitely is. You
Yeah.
got to show up for your family and your work and everything. However, that giving away of control, it's still something I'm probably struggling with an awful lot day to day. But something that, yeah, like with my sister, she has that story of her giving away control and then me coming to Jesus over the next month or so. And even like I really love the story of Jonathan Rumi who plays Jesus in The Chosen, right? So he's if I think of Jesus now, he's the face I think of, right? And I just want to give him a big hug. But he was like a completely broke actor, LA, the usual, like he's in LA and he's out of money and he's got like $7 left and all these bills, that sort of thing. And then he's like, oh, God, I'm putting this on you. Like, I'm out. You do whatever you need to do. And then he said that week he got some sort of financial blessing which covered him. And then a month later, he booked The Chosen and became Jesus in The Chosen. And now is, you know, extrapolate that like 4 or 5 years later, he's in like the Hollywood press tour right now, and The Chosen's reaching like millions of people. It's not like a little small show anymore. He was on bloody Jimmy Fallon the other day, like left wing Hollywood, secular Hollywood. They got Jesus on there, and like on The View and all these massive big like left wing shows, who are very very secular and nothing, against them, but like he was there, and so now he's bringing Jesus to like the whole world in a way that's probably never been done before because it came from him saying, "You take the wheel, Jesus," and here we are, and
Yeah.
that's been a massive part of myself and so many millions of people converting, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
what a vessel he's been.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's so, I was going to go back to that when you're saying, there's this revival with these men. And where I've seen it, obviously, is this new age. Like through that, there's this huge revival happening where we're like, wow, like he's just working. But I think it's happening in so many different areas that we, we like, I didn't see that. I mean, I saw Russell Brand, but a lot of those other guys I haven't really followed that much anymore. And so I didn't see that. So it's so good to know, like, it's not just, yeah, I mean, I obviously knew it was more than just the new age, but he's getting into all these different areas and reaching people through so many different means. And I am always so fascinated to hear people's stories of how he works to meet each of us individually of where we're at
Yeah,
and through ways that it's exactly what we need to be open to him
yeah, 100%.
because
I
it's
mean,
all
so
so different.
I find myself sometimes like pray, which is the most bizarre thing, praying for Joe Rogan because he's like he's on the edge. You can tell he's interviewing more people. He's on the edge, and if he accepts that thing that he's probably battling with a fair bit with Christianity, game over. That's like tens of millions of downloads an episode. If he says do kettlebell training, everyone's training kettlebells. If he says do the carnivore diet, everyone's doing that. And so if he says like pick up a Bible, it's going to go through the roof. And so really really weird thing to feel like you're praying for some bald meathead over in America, but just the influence that guy has on the world and on a lot of like probably angry young dudes and a
Yeah.
lot of others. That's not his whole audience, but like a lot of lost young dudes look to this strong multimillionaire as a role model, and it's going to be, yeah, I think he could be a massive part of a huge revival, and I think it's working on him at the moment. So just yeah, from the male perspective, that's what's happened in our world, and
Yeah.
all my internet friends dropping like flies.
So
Like
good.
everyone's Instagram bios suddenly got like a Bible verse in it, all that kind of thing. Come out
It's
of
so
nowhere.
It is. It's so crazy. And I think, and it's so funny because I literally use that exact same phrase. People in the new age are dropping like flies to Jesus. That's literally what I would say. And because when I'm in this 18 months of resistance, I'm like, what is going on? I was like, I truly believe they were like possessed. That's where we had got to. We're like, something has taken over them. Why would you give up like seven-figure businesses overnight? Obviously not overnight, but to them there was a process, but then they've just come out and going, no, I've just shut down my whole business. Because they were so deeply entrenched in these like new age practices and yeah, to follow Jesus. And it made no sense. That was the thing. It doesn't make sense to your mind. And a lot of people want it to make sense logically and have conversations like with my sons,
Yeah.
one in particular, and that's what he said. It just doesn't make sense. But you just know, I had never thought that deeply about it, but there just came a point. It doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't make sense that some dude died and then was resurrected 3 days later. But it was just all of a sudden felt so true to me.
Yeah. Yeah, the parenting thing is an interesting one because right now my kids kind of just listen to what we say and they love their like my once I got baptized, my sister bought me this like Jesus storybook Bible, which the girls love because it's nice stories and nicely illustrated. But right now they're four, they'll just say like whatever. So it'd be interesting to see what happens if we don't um if we don't force a certain path or we'll just do what we do. Interesting to see what happens with
Yeah.
their their heads and their hearts, as they grow and as they go to school and as they're exposed to social media and all sorts.
Yeah.
That's a funny thing, actually. Like so I didn't know about the new age, conversion. So we've got them, we've got the alpha males on the internet, and apparently I read that we've got the nerds as well. Apparently all the tech companies, a lot of tech like new tech companies in San Francisco and Austin are now taking upon more of a Christian mindset, which
Wow.
is which is nuts as well because this is complete opposite of what's been their whole message for 10
Forever.
years.
Yeah.
Like all these crazy smart progressive people over in Silicon Valley and stuff. I've read articles about they're having like worship music played at their parties, that sort of thing. Like it's come out of nowhere. It's really well, it's probably coming out of somewhere, not out of nowhere, but it's a man, yeah, it's very exciting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's exciting because I think to have more people in the world feel this peace is always going to be a good thing. And when you look out into culture right now, it can be a little bit scary. And I think, we're raising children in this. I have like older kids, but I also have a little one. Our youngest is 7. But yeah, sometimes you think, oh my gosh, like what are they going to be? What is the world going to look like when he's older? But I just think he just absolutely loves Jesus and is from no influence from me. It was pretty much after he was born that was the start of me coming out of all the new age stuff. But yeah, like no influence, but he talks to his older brothers and sister and like my husband and just so openly and so brazenly will just be like, well, why don't you love Jesus? He just doesn't understand it. And yeah, I just think there's such a purity with the children at that age. And I think as long as I've always been I don't want to force any of it on him. It has to be, he can lead the way with that. But I think what I've seen from a lot of my friends who grew up Christian and are now, who moved away from their faith was they grew up in religion. They didn't grow up having a relationship with Jesus. And that's the key. I think if you can develop that relationship with him in your children, they're never going to stray from their faith because how could you? Like, how could you stray from that once you've experienced it? Because I think that's what happens when people leave is that they never really actually knew him. They grew up ticking boxes and going to church and not actually ever being in relationship.
That phrase used to annoy me so much, that have a relationship with Jesus. I was like, you sound mental
That is true.
when you say that. When I used to every now and then go to my sister's church and like all they were doing was like talking to Jesus, and like when they'd sing, someone would put their hands up in the air. I'll be like, what is this place? This place is crazy. And that's why I never went back. I would go there like once a year to support her with some, sermon she was doing. And then I'd bail and be like, oh, that place sucks. This relationship with Jesus is such a crazy. How can a smart person think that? My sister's a genius. How can she think this? And then now here we are. Here we are. I'm going into this podcast and I'm saying, Jesus, please let me be articulate and serve you as best as I can when I talk to Carly.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? And that's the thing. That's what led me. I mean, he totally led me to start it, but it's like, this wasn't about me. I'm like, oh, I've had a podcast before, but like, really? But I actually love being, a witness to hearing people's stories or testimonies. And it's about glorifying him. That's the thing, is that even if one person listens to this and it switches something in them or just plants a seed, that's what it's about for me, because I think that's what we're all doing, whether we realize it or not. So
Yes, there's a book I've been listening to again. I think it's also by Lee Strobel, the Case for Christ guy, but it's more like how to actually share. And he says ultimately, our job isn't to convert people. Our job is just to put a stone in someone's shoe. And I love that phrase. I
that's
love
so
that
good.
phrase. And
Yeah.
and then let God do the rest. So I think that's you know, if we can do that a little bit with our conversation today, or a little bit of content that we do, or a little comment to one of our mates, that sort of thing, puts a stone in their shoe.
Yeah.
Maybe it's there for a long time, or maybe it's there for, you know, a month until something beautiful happens.
I love that, because that's literally what was happening to me. Someone put a stone in my shoe that challenged a belief that I had. And then I was like, oh, so you have no choice. Well, you do. You always have choice, I think. But if you're someone who is, seeking anyway, I've always been seeking the truth. I couldn't ignore that. And that's what that stone in my shoe wouldn't go away. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes.
Something I skipped over, and we certainly don't have time for it on this show, but it was in my journey to entrepreneurship in the early days. You join all these courses, and
Mm.
everyone's, you do your personal development, you do your NLP courses, you do your manifestation and your journaling, your affirmations and meditation and blah, 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 blah. And everyone's into all these different things, shadow work, whatever that is, and all this stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the whole time. And I work with coaches. I love a lot of coaches, but I've got this enormous level of skepticism for so much personal development, because I know that the more I was doing, the broker I was financially, emotionally, spiritually. And I was like this, no, until I actually read a book called You're Not Broken, which is basically success is structural, not personal. Just focus on like a few systems in your business and you'll do better. Right. And so that's what I kind of worked on from there. And yeah, everything just felt like empty, and then it didn't work. And
100%.
I could go into that for days, but for the, yeah, long story short, the new age stuff, I kind of had a crack at a lot of it and just found nothing for me there, except for guilt that I wasn't doing better because I'm doing all this stuff, I'm doing something wrong.
Yes, that's exactly what it creates. And it's very works based. And so when you succeed with that too, it has the opposite, it's like, I did that. So I was doing all the, Kundalini and all these mantras, and yeah, my business took off and I was making a lot of money. And that was me, rather than like it was actually around 2019 that I had this awareness of, wow, I've literally built my whole business on black magic, because that's what I believe Kundalini is.
Yeah,
And I was
right.
like, oh my gosh. And that was the start of me kind of coming out of the new age stuff. And yeah, it started as personal development, read a book, and realized, oh, I can change my beliefs, I can change my life. And that's where it starts. It's like, oh, that door opens and then it just dung, 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 and just it gets out of control. But the same doesn't satiate you, leaves you feeling like you're an absolute, like you're not getting anywhere. And I look at people who are still in that world now, and I just, with so much compassion, because I just think, oh, I just want you to know the truth, because it makes you, even if you can put on a facade that everything is well in your life, deep down there's that hole that, yeah, only God can fill. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
everything.
As a very new Christian, I can understand why that phrase there would be extremely triggering to some people and make us sound very arrogant, being
Mm.
like, you're not actually happy. You're not. And so I think that like potentially like some people I know, potentially they are very satisfied. But that was my answer to like, why don't you come to church? Why don't you try come to Jesus? That I was like, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm happy. I don't really need it right now, that sort of thing. So I think there's just a different level of it, and sort of it's that when you're like single, you can go happy or sad, you know, a little bit either way. And then when you're in like a long-term relationship, you can be more happy or more sad. And then when you have kids, like limits are removed, you can be like emotions you've never felt before. And I think that's kind of what switch into Christianity has done, is it's like, oh, you thought you were satisfied. It's like, let's remove that flaw. Welcome into this big hole of, this big pit of feeling good and peaceful and stuff like that you didn't even really know was there because you thought you'd hit that limit. And so, yeah, I always thought that sort of language from Christians was like really arrogant to say like, I know that you're not, there's a hole in you. Now I completely believe it, but I think that
Yeah.
there's a lot of really, really seriously happy people out there who are not Christians. But there's just I don't know, man. I think what it did for me, personal development, was it kind of, because you surround yourself with all these people doing so well, role models. I've got to follow. Like, you see that guy, he got 1 billion views on his morning routine this week. You see that guy? Some He's this jacked guy from England. Um, and he's like his morning routine, perfectly filmed, up at 3 in the morning, takes off his mouth tape and his nose tape and like washes his face in a bowl of sparkling water and all this bollocks. And you see him and all this success that he's having, and you surround yourself with people like this. Yes, it gives you something to reach towards, but it also creates this gap between like where you are now and where you think you should be, because you're just seeing success everywhere. And so while like it's inspirational, if you're not hitting those things due to limitless factors, and then you're, you know, conditioned to want stuff to happen immediately, all you do is you get more sad because you're not there yet. You know, like, oh, I should probably start getting up at 3:50 in the morning, like old mate, and putting tape over my mouth and, stop drinking anything but bottled sparkling water and put my face in a bowl of cucumbers and stuff like that in the morning. It's not working. It's not, I'm not, and even if you make some money, it's still not working, like, so I don't know, man, the personal development thing, very, very mixed feelings on it, because there's some beautiful people who have helped me change my life, like infinitely inside that world. And I've also had some very, charlatan snake oil experiences with it, where nothing's changed, where it's inevitably made me worse, feel worse, worse results in every area of my life. And I think that, thank goodness, thank God, I've got my family, because I think that's always been my grounding part in life. That's allowed me to probably explore different stuff, and then, finally land on the way, the real truth. But because I always felt like, okay, finances are no good, business is no good. I've always got my wife, that's sorted, my family's sorted, and I think that having that grounding for me has been really good, and that's allowed me to maybe explore different things and throw some babies out with some bathwater every now and then, knowing that like I've got a beautiful relationship at home. And yeah, I've turned a few corners in that response there. I apologize, but for the most part, I think that personal development is a very interesting world, and ultimately, it's probably all just moving towards what we now see as the ultimate form of it, which is Jesus.
Yeah. It's a very slippery slope, but I think because in that world, it's all you focused. That's the thing. And, like as I shared with you before, my eldest is 21 today. So I was 21 when I had him. So I have always, we've got 4 kids, my husband and I, and so that has been a grounding for me to some level, is that I could never go so deep into things because you didn't have that luxury as a mum. And so I'm actually so grateful for that. Even though I delved pretty deep into some things, there was still this foot in reality that doesn't always happen. I think when you have the opportunity to really be able to go, as a single woman, that I saw that a lot in the new age. And yeah, I loved that you shared about, that feeling of arrogance when Christians would say things like that, because I didn't have any Christians around me, not a single person. And probably because I judged them and didn't want
Yeah.
anyone around me. So that hadn't been my experience. So I love that you shared that, because I'm like, oh, I need to be very mindful of how I share that, because it's just that's been my experience, was that yes, even though on the outside, even when my business was at its most successful and so many things on the outside were amazing, there was still this feeling of unhappiness
Yeah.
that was underneath it all. It wasn't always present, but it was still there. And that's what hasn't been there. That's the thing
Yeah.
that completely shifted, is it's instead of this underlying feeling of unhappiness that was like navigating my world, it's like this underlying feeling of peace that's there now. Even when things go crazy, it doesn't mean you don't have challenges in your life, but at the bottom of that is peace now instead of chaos.
Yeah.
Also, yeah.
Yeah, at least the pursuit of peace is, yeah, for me it's there. Yeah. I love that. I think what's really helpful for me in these sorts of conversations as a brand new Christian is I can say to people who've been in the game for years. I was having a chat with my pastor the other day, um, about like marketing the church, how do you get more social content out there? And I was like, the content you need to be making is addressing all the things people hate about Christianity. For me, answering the questions that, used to really annoy me, like, and it really made me think that Christianity was this arrogant, bigoted, elitist group of, holier than thou people. Because I was in that group 7 months ago, dude. And like, so I think it's really that's such a blessing for me because now as I come to share it, I'm so like what's aware of how to do it poorly. Because one of my best mates I go to the gym with every day, he's at that level where he's just got those few questions of what about X, Y, and Z? All the big objections people have to Christianity. Um, and I had those exact objections less than a year ago. And I think that Christians, we can really learn to look at what our detractors are saying and learn to speak to that,
Yeah.
because that's what the case for Christ and the subsequent book, the case for faith, do really, really well, is they answer those like extremely challenging questions and they're difficult reads. But I think that is what broke me through, because it was like, I know what you're thinking. And that's classic marketing. It's what we do. It's like, know your clients, your customers' objections
Yeah.
and handle them before they have them. And I think that, that's what the world needs. It's hopefully, not to say how Christians should do it, but as a Christian now, that's what I'm going to try and do, is address the questions that I used to always have. And they're very seldom about Jesus. They're more so about like, what? So you're saying a Buddhist monk is going to go to hell? That sort of thing. That sort of question.
Yeah.
Even like a really good person, they're done for. That sort of question. So yeah, yeah. Another little tangent from me.
Oh, I love that. Tell me those answers when you get them, because I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that. I was having a conversation with my 76-year-old neighbor the other day, and it was so amazing. He somehow found out about my podcast. And yeah, he's just asking me about it and talking about a friend of his who just passed away this week, and he was 99 and he was an atheist. And he said he saw how he really struggled towards the end. Like he knew he was dying and just there was nothing for him to grasp onto. And I said, I guess that's the beautiful thing with people who have faith is like, I still don't even know the whole eternal life thing. I don't know if that's true, but what's the worst case? If it's not, it's not. Okay. But, one of my friends who I had on the podcast, she said it in a much more succinct way that, this is what led her to Christ essentially. She asked herself these two questions, and that was, if it is true, all that Christianity says, and there is hell, she said, at the end of my life, if I realize hell is real, will I regret taking my, leading my family to that? And she said, yes, like I'm going to regret that. And versus if I get to the end of my life and it's not real, like hell doesn't exist, heaven doesn't exist, whatever, will I regret that? And the answer was no. She's like, I will have lived a wholesome life. I will have led my children to live a wholesome life, good values, all of the things that come with living with a Christian. Ultimately, for the end game, yes, it's something to hold on to, but if it's not real, I'll be the same. I won't regret that. But I absolutely would regret if I found out, oh shit.
Yeah.
Turns it's not just some crazy story that someone made up, that was,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I was having this conversation with him. And I think, yeah, that's what it's about for me. And, I still consider myself a baby Christian. Like I'm a year and a half in. I do not claim to know all of the things. Like I said, my faith is still growing. Do I believe in eternal life? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do, for whatever reason, I do have the utmost faith that Jesus died and was resurrected because he put that in me. I know that didn't come from me because I was like, I'm a very logical person in most cases. And that doesn't make sense logically.
No.
But I feel like it's true. So
yeah, well, your podcast is called Liberated by Faith, not liberated by proof, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Faith is what we're doing. And yeah, you're right. The kind of risk to reward ratio is pretty well in our favor. Anyway, if you just end up following those sort of commandments and living Christian values, it's probably going to turn out to be a nicer life, no matter what happens at the end of it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I am so grateful to have had you on today. Is there anything you want to leave as a final thought? Anything else you wanted to share?
Nah, when I do that, I end up going on some ramble because I try and say something like some mic drop moment, but I don't really have one. So I'll just say thank you.
No, it's been so good to chat with you and very entertaining. And yeah, I just love to hear your story because yeah, there's just no two testimonies are the same, of course, but yeah, I really love to hear your sister's faith as well, like just holding on to that and the importance of, like, I don't doubt for one second that her praying for you nearly every day absolutely has an effect. And I think that's why it's so important. I never considered that before, but I know there was people that were praying for me, and yeah, prayer works. And I think that if there's one thing that we can take away from any of these conversations is that to just trust in God and his timing, because yeah, it's not always as quick as we would like things to happen, but yes, 20 years or a month, it doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, it happens at the exact right time.
Too right. I love that. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, total pleasure.
Much love, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Liberated by Faith podcast. I am so grateful to have you here, and truly just give all glory to God to all that has been shared here today. If you receive something from this episode, please just take a screenshot and share it on Instagram. Make sure you tag me at liberated_by_faith and just share your takeaways, and may God work through you and through into your sphere of influence to get this episode into the ears of those who need it most. I thank you again for your support, and I look forward to having you join me again in the next episode.